ради себя, ради Стива и ради вашего брака выработала определенные...
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Thank you, Dave. Some of you listening might know who I am already because I posted about this group and this meeting on message boards on Facebook. For those of you who don't know me, I'll be turning 38 in a couple of weeks. I've been a broadcaster for 18 years, and growing up, always wanted to be in radio, and I've been doing it for 18 years. And about 4 years ago, I applied for a job in Galena, Alaska, a village of 330 people, 400 actually, about 330 miles northwest of Anchorage. And I applied there because it was a chance to do radio that really mattered. And I also wanted to see if I could hack it. And I was hired as the program director for KIYU Community Radio, which serves about a dozen villages through low-powered Class D FM repeaters, 100 watts or less. And Tom should be putting up picture number 1 right now. And if you take a look at the picture, that is me standing in front of the KIYU studios. That picture looks a lot busier than it actually is. Looking at that picture, the only dish in use was the white one over my right arm and 2 above the door. That is the studio for KIYU. That was also the transmitter site for KIYU FM, KYES, LPFM, KGKR, LPFM, and K10LJ, a digital TV transmitter. And we'll touch on that a little bit later. I started DXing probably when I was about, I would say 11, 12 years old, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, something like that. My uncle gave me I think it was a Firestone branded tabletop radio and a long wire. And that just hooked me. I mean, to a 12-year-old in Connecticut, I was listening to WLW like it was WTIC in Hartford. And that was, a big deal. But I only really got serious about DXing about 6 years ago. I don't really recall why. It's just the way it worked for me. And I think I got serious about it because someone had given me an H800 Sky Match whip style antenna. And that really, I'd had a portable radio, a Sanjin ATS 909X. And, the whip worked great or whatever, but that H800 really lit things up and really got me hooked on it. In fact, when I was in California, my antenna was up a tree, and Tom, if you put up picture number 2, it's hard to see, but up in the middle of that tree was my antenna. And what got me excited to do more was how well that simple setup really, really worked. And, one of the reasons I went to Alaska, admittedly, was to DX. I admit that, because about a month after I got to Alaska, boss and I were just milling around the office, and we were talking about work and stuff. And I said there were a couple of reasons I wanted to work in the bush, and one was for DXing, because I wanted to hear things no one else would hear. And he's not a DXer. We are still in contact. He's not a DXer, but being the former program director for WSM 650, he would make fun of me a little bit, but he at least understood that. And what made DXing in Alaska unique was the weather. I couldn't DX from inside because if you remember back to picture number 1 where I was standing in front of the studio, I couldn't DX from inside because of all the electrical noise. Tom, if you put up pictures 3 and 4 and just cycle between them while I talk, this will make a little bit of sense. You're looking at the frozen Yukon River right now, my DXing setup. I had a 300-foot long wire going east and west, literally along the banks of the river you're looking at now. I also had a Wellbrook ALA 1530. I forget which flavor of it, but it was one of them. Had an MTech ZM2 antenna tuner, a DX Engineering RPA1 preamp, and 2 radios, a Texan PL880 and a low HF225. The low was used for AM, the Texan was shortwave, but it also just depended on my mood. One of the things I can say is, a lot of us being DXers or hams are probably familiar with DX Engineering. I can attest to how well built their stuff is because my RPA1 preamp sat under a pile of snow at 30 below zero for 2 weeks and kept on ticking. And some of you might think, why was he using a tuner? Well, Andy at Wellbrook will say you don't need one, and you don't. But I used one, and it in my experience, it made a difference. One of the things I had to adapt to, as we are probably all aware, is that radio equipment and batteries do not like the cold. Lithium-ion batteries do not like it. If you have a cell phone, you have a lithium-ion battery. And I discovered pretty quickly when cell phones got cold, even if they had, half a charge or a full charge, they would shut down. And I had started using a 12-volt lithium-ion battery to power the Wellbrook and the DXE RPA1 preamp, but that didn't work for too long. So I took an 8D battery holder. You literally put 8D batteries into it, and it plugs into, the Wellbrook or the DXE RPA1 preamp like it's a power supply. But I also had to keep things warm. And this is where Dave Marthouse will appreciate this. This is part of where the term Walker Knocker engineering came from, because to keep things warm, my recorder at the time was my phone. I didn't have, an outboard digital recorder like the Zoom H1. I would wrap my phone in a scarf, put one of those hand warmers, like you put in your gloves in the winter, put one of those hand warmers under the scarf and shove all of that in a spare glove. I had gloves galore. And it's weird, but it really worked, and it kept the phone warm. Where before the phone might work for a couple minutes, I could leave the phone outside for a while. Now, one of my favorite catches, Tom, if you'll get but not play quite yet, number 5. I'll tell you when to play it. Audio file number 5. Get that ready. This is one station that not a lot of people in the U.S., this is on shortwave, not a lot of people can hear. Tom, play audio file number 5.
This is Voice of Korea.
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 That was the Voice of Korea on 13745 kilohertz, I believe, at 0430 UTC to Latin America. That was, I could hear the Voice of Korea shortwave on probably a dozen frequencies, and that day in, day out consistently was the strongest signal. Now, the Voice of Korea is again is their international service. Tom, if you will queue up, let's see here, if you will queue up section file, I believe it is file 6. It's about 25 seconds long. Let's was the North Korea domestic service, KCBS Pyongyang on 657 kilohertz. North Korea wasn't an everyday thing on AM, but it was pretty regular. And to give you an idea of how good AM reception was in Galena with the long wire, I was about 275, 300 miles west of Fairbanks, which has a 10,000 watt station on 660. And occasionally KFAR 660 would kind of chew at KCBS on 657. Now, if you want to get file number 6 queued up, Tom, this was an everyday, without fail log for me in Galena. Tom, play file number 6.
Ради Киева и ради вашего брака выработала определенные установки. Составной частью этих установок должна быть готовность противостоять ему. Энн была не в восторге, но согласилась. Ей пришлось немало поработать, чтобы научиться противостоять мужу. Она столкнулась со своим страхом перед гневом.
That's Russian, and you might think that was Russia on AM. No, that was HLAZ on 1566 kilohertz. I forget where, but their transmitter site's in South Korea. It's a 250,000 watt 6-tower facility that had multiple directional patterns. And that, what you just heard was something I heard every day. It was that strong. I know it doesn't quite translate incredibly well over the internet, but just imagine hearing that on the radio and how it sounded. Tom, cue up file number 7. And we're kind of backtracking and moving forward again for those of you who were listening. This I would have to rate as one of my favorite catches of all time when I was in Alaska. Play file number 7. is one of the few remaining armed forces network stations left on AM. You know, back in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, they were all over AM, and now they've, you know, converted to FM. But that was 50,000 watt AFN 810, the Eagle. And it was one of my favorite catches because I thought it was so cool to hear a military radio station, but they also played pop music, which made it, which I don't know, just the geek in me liked that. Tom, if you will bring up the next set of pictures, number 8 and 9. Number 8 and 9, you can cycle between them as I talk. When the weather was nicer, I would be able to DX outside for longer, and I would sit by the river. Tom, files 8 pictures 8 and 9. And I kind of had the picture you're looking at now was kind of, it worked out well for DXing because I had a log I could sit on. I'd bring out a cooler, put down a laptop, and that laptop usually contained a preloaded list of shortwave stations. And there you can kind of see, you're looking at picture number 9 right now. That's a close-up of my setup. And I had to disconnect all that and bring it inside every day. And, you know, some might say you don't need an amp or whatever. And again, you don't need a tuner. But I was in such an electrically quiet environment that I was going to take every advantage I could take. I had no AM station within 200 miles of me. And if any of you are at all familiar with Alaska and sports, we should have a YouTube video to play here, hopefully. Every other year in Galena, one of the things that would come through in the winter, Tom, cue up the Iditarod YouTube video if you have that link. If you don't, let me know. We would see the Iditarod sled dog race come through Galena. And it was kind of neat because, you know, we were the center of the universe. Play the video, Tom. Oh.
There it is. Straight ahead, straight ahead, straight ahead, straight ahead. There it is, somewhere up there. Oh, yeah. All right, watch this ride. Ready?
We had a great vantage point at KIYU for the Iditarod sled dog race, because if you look at the end of the video, she's coming up off the frozen Yukon River and coming up the banks, and that's the radio station you see in the background. That was the video I shot that went on our website. Now, if you put up picture 10, 11, and 12, and you can cycle through them. KIYU, what you're looking at, the picture by the river, is the original KIYU facility. It was built in the mid 80s on 910 kilohertz, 5,000 watts non-directional full time. And the AM tower used to belong to Campion Air Station. Galena, some of you might be veterans and would find this interesting. Galena used to have an air base until the early 90s. And that's why for a village of 400 and change people, the runway is nearly 1.5 miles long at the airport. And in picture, one of the things you saw in picture 11, which you're looking at right now, that is a plaque right by the front door of the radio station. And picture number 12, if you want to pause on that for just a second or 5, Tom, the yellow circle in picture number 12 is the airport runway. And you can see, if you look real closely, that airport runway is like 1.5 miles long. The yellow, the orangish circle was Galena Interior Learning Academy, a statewide boarding school that was in Galena, that students from all over the state could come and learn there. And the red circle on the end of the picture is Galena. So you can't quite merge them, but look at the yellow circle, which is the airport landing runway, and the town of Galena. Stand the airport runway up on its side. It's still long. It was still longer than Galena. And if you go to slide number 13, the next one, Tom, slide number 13. This was my this was where I DXed from. The orange circle in the picture is where I DXed, and as you can see, it's literally right by the river. The red circle is where the radio station was, and that's where, you know, that's what you saw in some of the pictures. And the yellow circle is the grocery store. And for those of you wondering, yes, milk was $12 a gallon there, and hot dogs were $10 a pack. Galena was lucky because our airport not only had a terminal, but it was indoors. Some of the villages had a runway that was grass, and there was no terminal building. You got met at the airport by someone who would then bring you into town. Now, put up picture number 14 and leave it on 14 for a minute. That is KIYU's rack of equipment. The big black box you see at the top is the KIYU main transmitter, a P-Tech 500 watt, dialed down to about 125. And then the blue box below that is EAS. For those of you wondering, who are probably somewhat aware of EAS, I believe our monitoring was done over satellite because we were 200 miles away at least from Fairbanks or Anchorage. So our EAS monitoring was done over satellite. For what it's worth, though, I don't think we ever got an EAS alert while I was there. The second big black box that looks like the first one, that was the transmitter for KYES LP-FM. We did not own it, because those of you may be familiar, if you own a full power, you can't own an LP-FM. We didn't. We just provided technical service, rack space, and a transmitter site for it. And the two silver boxes that look real thin below the KYES LP transmitter are satellite receivers. They were used for bringing in NPR from KUAC 89.9 in Fairbanks, or coverage from Alaska Public Media Radio in Anchorage. We did not get our feed of NPR directly from NPR because they did not have a satellite that covered us. KUAC on 89.9 in Fairbanks was on the satellite because they had several translators spread across the state rebroadcasting them that were not able to be picked up over the air. So we would take NPR via KUAC, and yeah, we would have KUAC content and breaks and stuff like that on our air. The only time when we were automated that you would hear something local was our weather forecast and legal ID at the top of the hour. Now, one thing some of you might be wondering is, how did we feed our outerlying transmitter sites? KIYU had 10 or 12 outerlying Class D repeaters, and we fed them using satellite internet and a barracks box. And a barracks box is an IP appliance box, about the size of 2 packs of cigarettes, that you can pre-configure to pick up an internet stream without the need for a computer. And satellite internet has come a long way in even the last 10 years, but the last 20 years. Our method of feeding the outerlying transmitter sites worked way better than people would assume it would, because all that was connected to that satellite internet dish was the station's 128K stereo MP3 stream, and it worked okay. Now, would audio buffs like how we sounded? No, but for the middle of Alaska, it was acceptable. Tom put up picture number 15. KIYU was also home to an 18-watt ERP digital TV transmitter. And what you are looking at right now is me in front of that transmitter. I mean, look, I know it's 10 watts. And I know it's small, but that was the TV transmitter. KIYU's parent organization, Big River Public Broadcasting, was the owner of the translator, but programming was provided by Alaska Public Broadcasting Television, but it wasn't PBS. It was something called ARCS, or ARCS TV. That was on the .1 because this was digital. This was not analog, an 18-watt digital translator. ARCS was on the .1, and that was a conglomeration of ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox affiliates from Anchorage. It was like block programming. Maybe you can think back to the 60s and the 70s, where stations would do different musical genres during the day. You might get, ABC in the morning, PBS mid-morning, CBS middays, NBC afternoons. Tom put up picture number 16. It had 3 subchannels, .2, .3, and .4. And those were other 24/7 networks. I believe .2 might have been PBS. .3 and .4 were, I forget which ones, but if you go to if you do a Google search for ARCS TV Alaska, ARCS TV, ARCS TV Alaska, it gives you a program guide and a little bit better of an idea. And what you're looking at now on picture number 16, that is the transmit antenna for K10LJ, which was 10 watts in, 18 watts ERP out of the antenna. And I bet a fair amount of you have cable TV or satellite still. I can tell you that the picture for that 18-watt signal was amazing. And it wasn't because of the power, but digital TV looks absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Put up picture number 1 again, Tom. This is what we began the presentation with. And if you're looking at the picture right now, second tower from the left at the very top was K10LJ, the LP digital station on channel 10. And you can't really make it out because it's not a great picture, but on that same tower, a little below, was the antenna for KYES LP FM. And on the other tower at the very right edge of the roof, that was home to KGKR LPFM, which ran Seventh-day Adventist programming. And below that would be the antenna for KIYU FM. Put up picture number 17, and some of you might get a laugh at picture number 17 here. It was me at work, and I was asleep. It was a Friday, and I had a long day. I probably didn't get enough sleep, and I think that was like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and I had basketball games to board up because we aired basketball on KIYU. Apparently, I was snoring so loudly that my GM heard it through the glass in the newsroom, took that picture and texted it to me. And still to this day, 4 years later, occasionally, we talk about it. Now put up picture number 18, Tom, because we are getting to the end of my presentation. Picture number 18 is the KIYU studios. Studio, whatever. That is a Wheatstone IP12 console, Arrakis Digilink automation. And the tablet you see sitting on the console was what I read our news off of. I did the 12 o'clock and the 6:30 news Monday through Friday, and the noon news on Saturday and Sunday. And that it was more of a community bulletin board, but that's where I would read it off of. And I didn't mind doing the broadcasts on the weekends because I live 20 steps upstairs above the studio. And if you look closely at the picture, over to the right of the picture, where you see what looks like a couple of bright lights and red LEDs, those were the CD players we used, cart CD players. To the right of those is an old phone. Remember the old phones from like the 70s and the 80s that had like 4 clear buttons and 1 red one? That's what you're looking at now. And that was our studio phone. And you know, we could have had something nicer, but you know, that worked just fine. And right on the top of that speaker that has like yellow greenish lights, that is the thermometer. A lot of rural Alaska radio stations had them, I guess provided, I think, by the National Weather Service. At the time the picture was taken, it was 21.5 degrees below zero in December 2016. The other thing of note, it's kind of hard to see in the picture, but that desk that all the equipment is sitting on, if you look kind of closely, you can see the ruts and the divots and the stuff like that. That is the original desk that KIYU signed on with in 1986, and that picture was taken in 2016. One of the reasons KIYU kept the old phone and the old desk is because they worked. We were on pretty solid financial grounds because we didn't spend money just because we had it. And that just about wraps up my part of the presentation. But one of the things I wanted to mention, you may have heard at the top of the phone call, that during the Q&A, if you ask me a question, give me a second or two to answer. The reason is because I am back in Alaska. I accepted a job a couple of weeks ago and literally arrived this morning at KSKO 89.5 in McGrath, Alaska. I am the program director here now. I've been in Laramie, Wyoming for 2 years. And some of you DXers may or may not remember KSKO started out on 870 kilohertz. And it was 10,000 watts non-directional. Well, about 6 or 7 years ago, the barge could not make it up the river. Gas ballooned to $8.50 a gallon, as I recall being told. And the reason that comes into play is because the AM tower is 2 miles south of town. It was on generator power. And Tom, I know you have a picture of the KSKO studio building, if you want to put up the KSKO studio building picture. So what KSKO did, and there's the picture, that's the Crimson Cottage, as it's called. What KSKO did was apply for Class D FM repeaters. And one of the things unique to Alaska is you can apply for a Class D FM signal 24/7, 365 without waiting for a filing window. Some of you who went to college, and I mean this with the term of endearment, many, many years ago, probably had a Class D college FM station, and that's what KSKO is. And looking at the picture, look at the red building, that tower at the very top is the KSKO FM transmitting antenna. It is, we are licensed for 90 watts at negative 81 feet. And it still covers everything it needs to, because from my vantage point on the second floor of the station right now, I can see the western edge of town a quarter mile away. The eastern edge of town is probably about a quarter mile to my east. And of note, it's kind of hard to see on the picture, but the original KSKO studio to transmitter link dish is still on that tower as well. The KSKO AM tower still stands as a space for cell phone equipment. So that's that. I do plan to DX here in McGrath. I have an ICOM IC746 Pro, a long wire, an amplifier, and a tuner. I just haven't hooked it up. Probably won't this weekend. I may not. But before winter DX really gets into play, I do plan to be DXing from McGrath, Alaska. And I will leave you with this as I end the presentation. This is the first group I've publicly announced. I haven't put it on Facebook, any message boards. This is the first place I've publicly announced I've taken a new job and in the new location in McGrath, Alaska. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And I just saw someone mention that they said it's 16 and light snow. I think it was snowing earlier. It is 15, 16 degrees. The snow was stopped, but it was snowing earlier this afternoon. Thank you. I don't know how many of you are there. Maybe someone can tell me how many people are joining us, but I hope, you know, I droned on a little bit there. I talked about some minutia. I hope everyone enjoyed the presentation.
There are 47 of us out here south of the line.
Hey, Paul, that was excellent.
Maximum was
Thank
50,
you.
50 people in here.
50 people.
Okay.
And excuse me, Dave, before I pass it to you, thanks to Paul. I also want to recognize two participants through the chat. One had sent me a note this past week. We have someone that knows quite well Galena, Paul. We have Jim Shaw with us, Alpha Lima 7 Bravo Alpha. And he was stationed there for a while. And actually, he asked about a convenience store that was there. I don't know if Jim could come up and mention the name again. I lost the scroll here in the chat.
It was Hobo's Bar.
Hobo's Bar.
The runway.
There is a bar in Galena, and I'm trying to remember where it is. It wasn't like, I think it was kind of off the runway, kind of near like the post office. I don't remember the name of it though, because I never went there.
Okay. And my last, and before I pass it to Dave, I also want to recognize a DX that we have here with us. And we have a participant that's all the way has joined us all the way from down under. So to our friend in Australia, thank you for joining us. Dave, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, there we go. Thank you very much, Paul. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand in the Zoom and we'll acknowledge you or put your questions in the chat and Paul will be happy to answer them for you. Thank you very much for appearing for the presentation. Excellent job, Paul, on behalf of the Fairlawn Amateur Radio Club. And you're one of the good people, Paul. Thank you so much.
Dave, I have a question.
You're welcome. And okay, shoot.
Yeah, great presentation, Paul. It's really, really great. So I just got a question. How's when you're there, the impact of Aurora in terms of DXing?
It's one of the few slightly technical things that I can actually talk about because as Dave and Nomar know, I'm not an engineer. And for what it's worth, I've actually known Nomar longer than Dave. I've known Nomar for about 25 years. I've known Dave for about 15. But Aurora does play an effect, and the atmosphere, what I call the atmosphere puking up, for lack of a better term, it would affect it because one of the other strong shortwave signals besides Voice of Korea was Radio Thailand's World Service on 15590 kilohertz. And it was beamed, I don't know why, their North American service was beamed to the North Pole and back down. And that was like one of my strongest signals. But when the aurora would hit or the atmosphere would puke up, it would make even the strongest North Korea and Radio Thailand signals completely worthless and unlistenable. When DXing on an average day, DXing was pretty good in Alaska. On a very good day, it was, as cool kids would say, amaze balls. It was amazing, but it didn't take much for it to get bad. And when it got bad, it got very bad, and it was just pointless. Ed.
I just had a question for Paul. Paul, I'm looking at the website and it says that the KSKO employees, and it lists Dave Patty, general manager. Are you the second employee of the station now?
I am actually the only employee of the radio station right now. Dave left about a month and a half ago, and they advertised for two positions here, general manager and program director. And I was the one hired as program director because, as I describe, I'm a glutton for punishment with a sense of adventure. and here, I find myself, interestingly enough, Dave Patty is now at KIYU in Galena. He more or less took my old job.
I have a question.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes. So, Paul, thank you for doing this great presentation. It's Gordon W2TTT. Just curious, what do you do in your off hours besides DX when you're, and how do you deal with things like, the rolling in salary that I'm sure you're getting, and afford things like milk and hot dogs and other things. So how do you supplement your food and lifestyle in general while you're up there?
In my off hours, I actually have a feeling I will be DXing a little bit more in McGrath than I did in Galena, because from here in McGrath, I will actually be able to do it inside, and I plan to have my radio set up right on the table here. But outside of DXing, I'm on Facebook, I'm on message boards, email lists. For those of you who are on Facebook, I am the guy who 9 years ago created the I Take Pictures of Transmitter Sites Facebook group. That is my group. So that takes up a little bit of time. As for salary, I'm a single guy, live alone, no pets, no partner, no none of that. I don't have a car, and for that matter, you don't really need one here. So my expenses are pretty low. I do pay a little bit of rent to the radio station, but it's way below market rate, and it's plenty of space. It's kind of sort of like a studio apartment, but it's kind of one bedroom. The station, considering that I have very little expenses, the station pays me what I consider to be pretty good. And I think a lot of stations in Bush, Alaska realize they kind of pay what I personally call hazard pay. You got to pay fairly to damn well to get people to come up here. But I also supplement my income, not that I necessarily need to, but want to. I do some freelance voice work. I am on a station in Northeast Maryland on Sunday afternoons, WHGM Gold. I am also on local radio networks 24/7 classic country format that's heard on about 36 stations across the country every night. And even though I just left Laramie, Wyoming, I will continue to do afternoon drive there. And for all of you wondering, and this kind of goes into the question you asked, hot dogs and milk and stuff. It is the expensive stuff you heard about is the truth. It can vary from bush village to bush village, but milk can be anywhere between $8 to $15 a gallon. A can of soup is like $3. A pack of 8 hot dogs, like Angus beef, the good stuff, $10. A 2-liter bottle of soda is probably $9. So it's expensive, but generally speaking, most people get paid relative to what things cost out here.
Gotcha. Are you like, an outdoorsman? Do you like to go, snowshoeing or hunting or fishing or any of the other outdoor activities? Mushing with sled dogs or any of these other amusements that people do for fun up there?
Interestingly enough, no. For living in a place that is known worldwide for outdoor hunting, outdoorsman type stuff, I don't hunt. I don't fish. I don't do any of that. So it's kind of ironic to live in a place like this.
Paul, you definitely are like me. Radio was my livelihood, and radio is my hobby. Paul, we have a question that comes all the way from India, from Sudipta Ghost. Good evening, Victor Uniform 2, Uniform Tango. Welcome to the presentation.
Many thanks for giving me the chance to speak. I'm amazed by the Paul's way of life. It is almost same to me. I am a retired guy. I retired from civil service about 5 years back. And radio is my only hobby. Only from early morning to late night, whenever I am awake, I think about radio. And I find that Paul is on the same boat. I would like to see his presence on this Facebook group of transmitter sites, which I also post whenever I visit a transmitter. Good luck, Paul, and 73s to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Someone in the chat, and I can see the chat now because I figured that out. Someone, Gerard Hart, brought up KFBK in Sacramento. And he said, I quote, I picked up KFBK Sacramento once from Northern Alaska. I guess I can add, KFBK was one of my nighttime regulars. I could hear it every night. Some nights it would be marginal, but listenable. Other times it would be okay. And other times it would just scream in. And I unfortunately don't have the picture readily available. But I actually got a KFBK QSL card hand delivered to me by engineer Dave Fortenberry when we were in Las Vegas 3 years ago.
I picked it up from Cape Romanzoff.
Where exactly is that? That name doesn't ring a bell.
It's in between Scammon Bay and Hooper Bay.
Ah, okay. McGrath, for anyone who's still hanging out and left with us, McGrath, if you look at a map, look at Anchorage and draw a line about 230 miles northwest of Anchorage. Basically, not quite central Alaska, but pretty darn close.
This is Don, WA2IWC, with a question.
Okay.
I really enjoyed your presentation. I'd sure love to hear a heck of a lot more of those recordings, I must say. I'm in the middle of Midtown Manhattan in New York City, which is about as opposite as you could get, and probably the worst place for DX you'd ever want to live. But were you able to hear stations on the AM broadcast band from the Northeast, New York, Boston, Connecticut, et cetera? Were you ever able to catch any stations from the Northeast of the United States?
No, I was not. To the best of my recollection, I never did. I heard a fair amount of Western and Central Canada, California. I heard KNX Los Angeles every night. KNX was consistently more regularly stronger than KFBK, but at times KFBK could be way stronger than KNX. When I was in Galena, my graveyard distance record is about 2,500 miles, KIHH 1,400 in Eureka, California, and it was actually fairly clear. But to kind of get back on topic, I believe my farthest east, and I don't keep formal logs like a lot of people do, because I just do this for fun. I record audio, save the audio, and that's my log. I don't have an Excel file, a Word file, a paper file, whatever. But I recall my farthest east log was probably CJNB 1050 in North Battleford, Saskatchewan. I believe it's around 2,200 miles east, slightly southeast of Galena.
Wow, that's awesome. I'd hate to think if you had strung some beverages, what you would have done. Oh my God.
You're probably right. You're probably right. I would have probably done better, but I only got serious about DXing in Galena, like super serious, and I just wasn't aware of everything that was capable of being done. And I also had to work with what I had. I didn't really have any help. So I had to do what I could get done by myself, which was a 300-foot long wire on a ground and a Wellbrook loop on a speaker stand.
Well, and also you couldn't do it inside in the comfort of your relatively warm house. So it's a tremendous achievement in what you did. Have to stand out there in freezing weather and DX. That's very impressive. Thanks for a great presentation.
Well, you're welcome. And I did have to
I had to do what I had to do to DX, and you know, as I've said to numerous people, to Dave Marthouse, to Nomar, and others, if I wanted to hear stuff no one else was going to hear, I had to do it. And I had to go outside. And for anyone wondering, you know, how long did, what was too cold to go outside? After about 2 months of outside time, I figured out that anything colder than 25 below was too cold and intolerable and potentially dangerous to me. So I wouldn't go outside. And there was the span, it was like.
Great job, Paul. Appreciate it. This is Tom, N2AXX. Couple of questions. I'm very intrigued by the cover photo of today's talk. To the left of what you call the Crimson Barn, there is a large building, and I've noticed that has some air conditioning units in the windows. What is that building in the complex to the left? And I have a follow-up.
I believe it might be an old FAA, or someone explained to me what exactly that was, but I think it was a government building of some kind, and for multiple reasons is not habitable right now.
Understood. Very interesting about the radio stations you speak of, high power, higher power, and lower power. What's the demographics of the listeners? Are they Eskimo, Native American, military? And what are the typical jobs? Logging, science exploration, tourism, guides? What do people work at?
Well, as demographics go, McGrath is about 330 people. A large portion of what you're going to find in Bush, Alaska, is Alaskan Native of some, and I use the word ethnicity loosely and with no offense meant. There are many different kinds of Alaska Natives. Like when I was in Galena, it was Athabascans. And there are, you know, if you head further south and west around Bethel, it's Yupiks. The populations of these bush villages, for the most part, tend to be a bit older because younger people will graduate high school, leave, and I would say better than 70% of the time, and certainly understandably, but unfortunately so, don't come back. As for jobs, some are government-related jobs because you have Alaska Department of Fish and Game, Department of Natural Resources. At one time, McGrath had a National Weather Service office. It does not anymore. But some jobs also, they're in more hub type villages that are hubs for the region. You'll have a grocery store like the Alaska Commercial Store, which people work at. And for those of you who want a better example of how expensive groceries are, do a Google search for Alaska Commercial Store. And then on the top of the website, there's a button called Flyers. Click that and enter 99627. That's McGrath's zip code. You'll see a flyer for our local grocery general store. People also work for city governments, and education is a fairly, depending on what village you're in, education can be a big employer as well.
Thank you very much, Paul. Very interesting and a great compliment to the armchair traveler. Much appreciated. Be well.
Thank you.
Okay, any couple more questions before we start wrapping up? I know that Paul has been traveling since yesterday, and I'm sure that he needs to chill a little bit. So yes, somebody had a question. Go ahead.
Yes. No more. I've got a question for Paul. Jim Shaw, AL7BA.
Go right ahead, Jim.
Okay.
And again, glad to have you with us tonight.
just a one in a million question. Do you happen to know a Justin Huber in Galena?
Oh, that name might ring a bell. It's been a couple of years, but if he was in Galena when I was there, I probably heard the name. I probably ran across him.
Yeah, his call sign is Alpha Lima 2 Juliet.
Oh, yes, I know. Okay, I know exactly who that is. He is the caretaker of the church in one of the churches in Galena. We called him Brother Justin. I know exactly who that is.
Okay, I worked him back in 2002 when I was in Ohio.
Oh, neat.
Thank
okay. It took me a minute because I never called. He was always Brother Justin to us. So yes, yep.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Kind of old home week.
By the way, just to put this out there for the ham radio operators and to Paul, there are 2 ham radio operators in McGrath. So hopefully, Paul, one of these days you'll be the third one.
You know, I would like to, Nomar, and we were talking about, for those of you who weren't privy to this conversation a couple of days ago, Nomar and Dave and I were talking about me getting licensed, and it's kind of, I don't know, ironic because I own an ICOM IC746 Pro. We were talking about FT8, and in Nomar, I said, you know, I could hang an antenna out the window. I'm standing in front of that window right now. There's a perfect place to mount it because there's a 4x8 board right out the window. It would be perfect to put an antenna on.
Beautiful. So, well, we'll that will be something for future reference, and we'll let everybody know if you get your license at some point. Well, not if, when you get it. So, any other questions for Paul before we give our 73s?
If anyone would like to drop me a message, and I'll just offer this, as Nomar just put out the last call for questions. If anyone would like to contact me personally, I'm totally cool with that. My email address is walkerbroadcasting@gmail.com. Walker, as in my name and what I do, walkerbroadcasting@gmail.com. I'm pretty snappy and quick on the email replies, and I wouldn't mind corresponding with people. Because basically, I DX, I do radio because I love what I do, and I like sharing what I love with other people.
Oh, thank you very much.
Dave, go right
Sure
ahead.
will.
Dave, go right ahead.
Oh, there we go. My microphone was above my head. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. On behalf of FLARC, I'd like to thank you very much. And it was an excellent presentation. Certainly opened up a window into a part of DXing and a part of the world that not many people see. And it's just been a blast having you here. And one of these days we have to get you to New Jersey. I know you're originally from Connecticut, so if you ever come down to the lower 48 to visit, love to have you down here in New Jersey and can visit us at FLARC, and maybe by that time you'll be licensed. So again, on behalf of everybody in the Fairlawn Amateur Radio Club, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Dave. It was fun. I mean, legitimately fun, and I enjoyed. You know, I think anyone who knows me knows how much I love what I do is for work and for hobby, but I hope people who didn't know me, who were listening, could hear the passion and the excitement in what I do. Plus, if I didn't love what I do, would I be in McGrath, Alaska in winter?
Good point. Good point, Paul.
I had fun. I hope everyone
Definitely.
enjoyed. Dave, Nomar, everyone, thank you.